You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. Nikki Sims here with Matt Reynolds. Today, we're going to talk about programming. And by that, I mean, we get to talk about what you're actually going to do in the gym and how you choose amongst all the options what to actually get in there and get done. And I think one of the biggest problems that people deal with is there are so many choices to make. Like you have time in your schedule, you have the motivation right now, you have a sea of machines, you have a barbell, you have the internet telling you what to do, and you can do everything and get some results. You can do the most effective thing for even the smallest investment and get sometimes arguably better results. But how do you know which is which? Yeah. And Matt and Scott coined this great programming term that it's the philosophy that we use for programming at Barbell Logic, which is the minimum effective dose. So what amount of work right now is the smallest investment, which doesn't mean it's going to be like easy. Like you're still going to have to show up for it and put in some work, but it gives you the biggest return on investment. And where did that kind of come from? And
yeah, so I think when Scott and I originally started talking about this, so for those who are new to the podcast, my original podcast host was Scott Hambrick. God rest his soul. Died a few years ago. No, not at all. Actually, he's actually coming out to the house in a couple of days to have lunch with Rachel and I. He and Charity are. So no, still great friends. He's an Oklahoma farmer now, and but Scott's got an IQ of about 160, and he saw the way we were coaching at Barbell Logic, and you're exactly right. So when someone starts training, they've never trained before, anything makes them better. Yeah. You know, literally hopping on a bicycle and riding your bicycle around the block makes you better. Walking around your neighborhood makes you better. Going to CrossFit makes you better, which is a lot harder than walking around the block. So, and of course, you know, people will join these big box gyms and they've got literally, I mean, an unlimited number of exercises you could do, all this cardio equipment and all of this weight equipment and machines and free weights and where do I start? And the reality is anything that you start with, if you're doing nothing, will lead to improvements for a period of time. And what we had done is we had figured out over several decades of work with other coaches and in other communities, what was probably giving us the best bang for our buck for a brand new lifter, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But the question is when you're not a brand new lifter anymore, do the same concepts still apply? So can you still make little changes, minimum effective dose kind of changes for maximum return on investment? Or do you just have to go, pardon my French, balls to the wall all the time to get maximum? So that's right. More like that's it, right? Well, if I make a habit there was a day in my life when I was a competitive powerlifter many years ago where I probably lived on ibuprofen. I don't really take that stuff hardly ever anymore. I don't take ibuprofen, Tylenol, aspirin, NSAIDs, you know, naproxen, any of that kind of stuff, hardly ever. So that when I really need it and take it, I can literally take the actual prescribed like 2 pills and it actually does the job. It knocks out the headache or knocks out the fever or does the thing.
So your minimum effective dose a long time ago was a huge dose.
About 10 pills. Well, listen, everybody, again, this term, minimum effective dose, comes from the medical community, right? And side note, have you seen the show Dope Sick?
No.
Oh my God, Nikki, you've got to watch this show. And all listeners, you got to watch this show.
Big Pharma?
I knew you were going to ask me this. I think it's Hulu. It's Hulu.
It's about Big Pharma? Is that what it is?
It's a true story about Big Pharma and the rise of the opioid epidemic in the U.S. Okay, now, obviously, the reason I'm saying this is when OxyContin first came out, I think it was a 10 milligram pill, right? OxyContin is a time-released opiate. And opiates work really, really well for pain. And opiates are really, really addictive. That's the problem. And so what would happen over time is 10 milligrams that would kill the pain for people for whatever pain they had, after a while wouldn't work anymore. That was the minimum effective dose. And so then they would have to go to 20 milligrams and then 40 milligrams. I think they got to the day where there was like 160 milligrams.
Holy moly.
I don't want to say that wrong, and please don't sue me if you're the maker of that. But I mean, it was like enough that it was a big enough pill that it would kill some people if they had not taken it, right? And so that idea of minimum effective dose is, why would I take 10 ibuprofen to kick the headache if 1 or 2 ibuprofen work, right? There's no reason to do that. And of course, with the more and more things that I have to do, like the additional side effects I get come with it, right? So training is much the same way. So if I can get the best bang for my buck doing the least number of exercises in the least amount of time, in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes in the gym, why would I go in and do 20 exercises over a 4-hour period in the gym?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Especially if it's coming at the cost of other things. Like, are you spending too much time away from work? Are you spending too much time away from your family? Like, are you just beating your body up so much that you're actually going to hit a wall really soon?
That's right.
Usually
so, I mean, there are people obviously who really love to train, and you even talked about this in your early days of training. Like, you would just go to the gym and you would train for like hours a day and do different classes and stuff like that. But the one thing that we all share in common is that we all have 24 hours in a day, and we have to choose what we do with those 24 hours. And 1/3 of those should be devoted to sleep, and often people don't do that, but they should be, right? And that's really inarguable. And then what you do with the other 2/3 of your day, you know, like you work and spend time with people that you love, your family, relationships, eating, napping, more sleep, if you're my wife. No, like whatever it is. And so you're making a conscious effort if you train 4 hours and you could have trained 30 minutes or an hour for the same benefit. You're making a conscious effort to sacrifice something. You're sacrificing something into that because we all have 24 hours a day. And so we start with, and we'll get here in a minute, but we start with the very basic lifts. The other term that we've coined over the years is not just minimum effective dose, and applied that term. I certainly didn't invent that term, but I sort of applied it to strength training and programming. The other term that we talk about a lot, and it coincides with this, is simple, hard, and effective. And I would argue that for the vast, vast majority of people, that simple programming, simple training is often the most effective. But simple doesn't mean not hard.
Right.
It has to be simple and hard to be effective. It can't be simple and easy to be effective. It doesn't need to be complicated and not hard, right? It can actually be, and people do all variations of these things. People will do complicated training that's not that hard. They do complicated training that is hard, and they'll get good benefits from it. But why would you do complicated and hard if you could do simple and hard?
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, if simple and easy gave us the same return on investment as simple and hard, I would argue you should do simple and easy. It's just that simple and easy doesn't. Right?
We probably wouldn't have jobs.
That's where that's right. That's where this idea of minimum effective dose comes from. So we walk into a gym. We're an absolute beginner. We don't know where to start. There's a million exercises we could do. We have spent lots of time and lots of podcasts and lots of videos identifying why the big compound lifts. And when we say that term, we literally mean the movements that make the most joints in your body bend, right? So those lifts are things like the squat. At this point, you know, honestly, thank God for CrossFit and powerlifting and some of these things. Like those things, like squats, barbell squats were not in vogue in the 90s, and they are today. Like, that's, people understand that squats are hard and squats work. Squats build booties. Squats make you strong. Squats
make your back stronger, they make your legs stronger.
They make everything
Such
stronger.
A great stimulus.
That's right. So squats work. Deadlifts work. Deadlifts, just picking weight off the ground, works. And heavy presses work, whether that's overhead press or a bench press or both. Those things work really, really well. And you don't need much more than that. So you can literally take 4 exercises, maybe add some chin-ups or pull-ups or something. But like, that's really it. That's all you need in the beginning to get the best bang for your buck. And so that's how we start. And then what we do is we actually start with a pretty conservative weight on all of those things. Whatever you do. For some people, it literally will be the empty bar. For some people, it'll actually be less, like on a press. It may be less than the average empty bar. An average empty bar is 45 pounds. Some people can't press 45 pounds. Some people are going to have to start with, an aluminum bar,
Right.
a PVC pipe.
Maybe even dumbbells. Yeah. Something small.
5-pound dumbbells, like something like that is
something
fine.
that gives you some runway.
That's right. And then you just add a little weight every single time. Like you come in 3 times a week and you do the same lifts. And you're like, this seems incredibly boring. I've got a handful of new clients. So I'm testing out our ability to do health metrics with wearables on our app. So things like people are wearing Apple Watch or a Garmin or a Fitbit or a Whoop or an Oura Ring or whatever. And we're collecting some of those health metrics. And so I've got some clients that are brand new. And I'm like, guess what we do every day first? Squat, 3 sets of 5, right? And they're like, every day? And I'm like, yep. Well, and not every day, 7 days a week, every workout. So, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So it's 3 days a week. And they're going to do some form of heavy pressing. It's going to be an overhead press, like a military press or a bench press. And then they're going to deadlift. And they're going to basically, the workout literally looks pretty much the same for the first few months. It's really, really simple. It's minimum effective dose. It's 1 ibuprofen, not 10. And then what we do is we add like 5 pounds or a little bit of weight every single workout. And we can do that for a long time. And that term is called linear progression. I didn't invent that. If you look at it on a line graph, it literally just goes up. Like if you're watching this on video on YouTube,
so much
it
fun.
Literally just goes.
Where else in your life
goes up.
Can the little bit of work that you do lead to this result?
Right.
So few things in your life.
Imagine if you ate exactly correctly, like you weren't starving yourself, but you were eating the right amount of protein, carbs, and fat. And every day, and you needed to lose 20 pounds. And every day you got on the scale and you lost a half a pound.
It's just this.
And it just linear a half pound. I weighed a half pound. Hormones didn't matter. Menstrual cycles didn't matter. None of that stuff swayed. Salt intake. Oh, I had too much soy sauce, which by the way has like no calories in it, right? And yet it will dramatically affect how much you weigh on the scale.
Definitely.
So what's beautiful about linear progression in the beginning is you just add a little weight to the bar and you get a little bit stronger every single time. And
so
that is the minimum effective dose, not just the minimum effective dose for minimum return on investment. It's the minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment, so it's the best of both worlds. It gives me the best return for the least change. And here's why that's really, really cool. In the beginning, if let's say I'm going to add 5 pounds every squat workout and I'm 4 workouts in and I'm scheduled to squat 120 pounds, let's say, just picking a number out of thin air, but not that heavy. But I could squat 175. Should I?
How hard is that 175?
Well, is it the minimum effective dose?
No.
So it's the same question. If I have a headache and 1 ibuprofen will kill the headache.
Yeah.
Do I need to take 5 ibuprofen? Well, here's a question. Will 5 ibuprofen kill the headache? Yes, it will. But why would I take 5 ibuprofen to kill the headache if 1 will do it?
And how many are you going to have to take the next few times you get a headache?
That's exactly right. Because what it does is it changes the baseline where the minimum effective dose starts. And so if I've never squatted, if last time I squatted 115 pounds, and this time 2 days later, I'm going to squat 120 pounds, my body will still adapt because I've never squatted 120 pounds, even if I'm able to squat 175. If you squat, let's say 175 would be like a horrifically hard work. Like that's the most you could do. And you come in 2 days later, could you squat 180? Probably not.
Nor are you going to want to.
You're probably going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
And so what we want is the minimum effective dose, not because we're lazy, because we want to make progress for as long as possible.
Yeah.
This isn't about changing everything about our, like having perfect bodies and super strong. Everything is awesome 2 weeks in. Like that's not what we do. This is a lifestyle change.
And I want to say this really applies more to the barbell exercises than it does on machines, because machines isolate your muscles. So they typically minimize the number of joints that you're using to perform the movement to 1, maybe 2 joints. And so if you try to go up 5 pounds a workout, on a machine, you are going to tap out very quickly because you
quickly.
have so much less muscle to contribute to it. And so already you can see that you can't get a useful dosage from machines. It actually takes like weeks to go up because it takes
That's
you,
right.
you have to like go up in reps first, and then you have to go up in frequency, then you go back down in frequency, then you go up in weight. And so it's like, it's actually really like up to progress in a machine is actually very complex.
That's right.
For how simple the movement might look.
It violates the law of simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And that simple, hard, effective piece, it's a very important part of minimum effective dose. And so by using things like barbells and the big compound movements that use lots of muscle mass, like squats and deadlifts and presses, then I can actually just add a little weight and I can work out 3 days a week, say every other day, something like that. And I can add a little weight every single time. And I can make progress that way for 2 months, 3 months, sometimes 4, 5, 6 months. Some people do this for 6 months. Now 6 months isn't common.
Yeah.
But 6 weeks isn't common either. It's something between the two. And so the question is if I can do the big, basic compound movements, and rather than having to do 20 exercises, I only have to do 4 or 5 exercises. And I can add a little weight to those exercises every single time I train. And I don't have to train 7 days a week. I can just train 3 days a week. And I don't have to train 4 hours. I can train 45 minutes. And I can make progress every single workout for, let's say, on average, 3 or 4 months. Why would I do anything different?
That sounds awesome.
It sounds awesome. You and I have both been there many, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was like during the Reagan administration. It was a lot of presidents ago. Okay, maybe it wasn't the Reagan administration, but it was a long time ago.
Right? And I are only like 5 years apart. In
Yeah,
age.
I know, but I just assume Nikki's like 22, and I'm like, and then I think I'm 65.
Right.
So I tried to get the senior discount at the restaurant last night, but I hadn't qualified yet. So, well, I was at Hibachi, and they were like, "I'd like the senior meal," and I was like, "I'd like the senior meal," and they were like, "Well, how old
You're
are
like,
you?" And
I'm
I was
here
like,
at 5:30.
I was like, "Bro, yeah, it's 4:45. What does it matter how old you are? Senior discount should be based on the time. Early bird special equals senior discount. That's the deal." Anyway, so that is how minimum effective dose plays out for beginners. Now, here's the question, and this is what Scott figured out. This was the longest answer to any one question of it. I believe you asked this question 23 minutes ago. She's like, how did Scott figure this out? What Scott realized was when that stops working, that won't work forever. I can't add weight to the barbell every single workout for eternity, or we would all squat 2,000 pounds, right? So at some point, it's going to slow down and get really hard, and I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. At some point, my body will not be able to do that. He realized that we didn't have to completely change the whole program. And not only did we not have to, he looked at the data we had at Barbell Logic and what our coaches were doing and realized that the coaches weren't doing it anyway. We were just making little changes. And so
cool.
Instead of making 5-pound jumps, we would go to like 2.5-pound jumps. We would use micro plates for micro gains. Or we would switch from 3 sets of 5 on the presses to 5 sets of 3. Or we would do instead of 3 sets of 5 on squats, we would do a top set of 5, a heavy set of 5, and then we'd back off, 10 or 15% and do 2 more sets of 5. We would just change one variable at a time, just one, to keep making progress. And that's that idea, was a minimum effective dose to continue to get a return on our investment and even maximize that return. And so that was the idea. And so that kept things really, really simple. And what it kept us from doing is it kept us from having to program hop. When I was growing up, I was reading Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine and whatever Bill Phillips, what was that called? That was so good. Muscle Media 2000 or something like that. It was incredible.
Love it.
So I was reading all, and you would just be like, I don't know, I've been doing this program for a while. Feel like I'm not getting more jacked every day. Let's just pull out this new program out of the magazine and do that program. And that program looked nothing like the program I was doing the week before. And so you're program hop. So the problem with that is that because it doesn't really follow the basic, simple scientific method, then even if the new program worked, you didn't know why it worked. If you go back to the scientific method of like developing a theory and a hypothesis and testing that and right, So I've got this hypothesis. I think this will work, and I'm just going to change a variable, and I'm going to have, I'm going to have a baseline or a placebo, somebody who's not going to change that thing, and I'm going to see what this one variable change, like what kind of impact it makes. That is the basis of the scientific method, and we apply the same to programming. We just change one variable and we see if it works. What's also then beautiful is it doesn't always work. Sometimes we choose as coaches for our clients to change a variable, and that variable change didn't lead to the desired outcome. But if it doesn't, we know what variable we changed that didn't work.
You don't have to just throw the whole thing away and be like,
I guess I'm starting over again.
Start over
That's right.
again. Yeah.
So you realize when something isn't working faster than normal. You know exactly what didn't work. So you can go back and you're like, okay, let's go back to the way it was, right? And change a different variable and see if that works. And then you're like, oh, that works, right? And so very quickly you can.
Yeah.
So that is the general concept of minimum effective dose. And when that's done, instead of going from very traditional template-based novice programs to very traditional template-based intermediate programs to very traditional template-based advanced programs, you can one step at a time transition through all the way from absolute beginner programming to very advanced programming years down the road, making one small step change at a time. And that's what's so beautiful about minimum effective dose.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, what's crazy is it works the same. You know, we had done a podcast, I think last week with Tanner about style. Like he uses the same, like when he tries to improve somebody's style, he does the same thing, one step at a time. We look at Jillian. Jillian has her 7 steps to success, her habits. She literally applies the same thing to nutrition. She doesn't like our head nutrition coach can look at what you're eating over a 4 or 5 day span. And if you tell her the truth, and you take pictures of everything you eat and you don't really change anything, she could throw 25 new steps at you and all 25 would be valuable. But man, changing 25 things at once is really, really hard and not very sustainable. So she does what she calls the triage method. And really it's the same thing, right? It's identifying what is the minimum effective dose that will give the maximum return on investment. So she looks at somebody's nutrition. She triages their nutrition and she changes just the one thing that'll lead to the greatest improvement and lets her clients adopt that until it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, then she looks at the next minimum effective dose change. So this doesn't just work in strength training or in strength programming. It works with nutrition. It works with budgets. It works with relationships. It works with, like, and again, I want to be careful because it's not all about pragmatics and A plus B equals C. Like I can't just, what's the minimum effective dose thing I can do to be a better husband? And like, you know, all right, I conquered that. I'm a better husband. Like now what's the next step for how to be a better husband to Rachel? Like, you know,
such an evolving journey.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not. So I want to be really careful. It's not just pragmatics.
We're humans.
Right. And because of that creates the complexity. So when the programming is simple, hard, and effective, what gets complex is I've got very simple programming for my client, but sometimes my clients get COVID and get sick.
Yeah. Actually, Andrew and I were talking about this on 2 podcasts ago is, you know, your coach has to be able to adapt the program to you
quickly
and they need to know which simple things need to be adjusted to keep it hard, but doable and effective. Yep. And when you're the person trying to make these changes, it can be really confusing and you may not know which lever to pull. And you also might be too emotional from all the stuff that's facilitating the need for this change. So the coach needs to be more than just a form technician. They need to be a programming technician, but appreciate that you're human and give you the right kind of dosage modification depending on the circumstances at play.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, your coach, if you have a professional coach, like a real professional, somebody who really knows what they're doing, they'll be able to be malleable with your programming and change your programming, you know, little tweaks. Like, again, minimum effective dose tweaks, not let's scrap all this and do a new program
Yeah.
based on some of the things that are occurring in your life, based on the additional stresses or sickness or just performance from the previous workout or two. Sometimes you look at it and my clients are like, how did you know whether to go up 5 pounds instead of 2.5 pounds or 2.5 pounds instead of 5 or whatever the thing, or how did you know to take me up just one more rep? And, right. And it's like, well, I've done this for 30 years.
Right.
Like I've coached you, whoever that person is, for 6 months or a year or 2 years. Like I also have got a feel for, you just kind of know. Right. But so as a coach, I think it's our job as a coach to make sure that we are consistent. We have a pulse on our clients' performance, both in and out of the gym, to be able to be flexible enough to make those little changes that get them the best return on investment. This is why a template will work, but a template will never give you the best return on investment because it doesn't take into account all those other things that happen to the client's life. Yeah. However, it's the client's job. For those of you listening who have a coach, it's your job to communicate to your coach when those changes occur, right? It's okay. That's why it's so important to build the right relationship, a professional relationship between the client and the coach, a real relationship, one that like the coach cares about the client cares about the coach, and the client understands the coach cares as much about their training as they do. That's really important so that when, I've said this before a million times on the podcast, but when somebody has an argument with their spouse, when someone has additional work stress, when someone has a kid that was in a car accident, is okay, but is at the hospital and you're still worried about it, or when you get COVID, or when, like whatever that thing is, I need to have a transparent enough relationship with my clients. Look, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not here to counsel through those things. But what I am here to do is help make appropriate changes in the gym that help reflect, understand, and take into account all those other things that you're dealing with in your life. I get to control what my clients do, theoretically, if they listen to what I'm saying. 1 hour a day, 3 or 4 days a week. And there are all these other hours that I don't know, like if I don't have any idea what their relationship struggles are, or job struggles, or kid struggles, or stresses, or financial stuff, or sickness, or whatever, right? As a client, you've got to be able to share the things that you're comfortable with. I don't need every single last detail. Again, I'm not trying to be your counselor. I'm just trying to be able to program correctly for you and be malleable to give you the best return on investment. And often when those stresses occur, and they're like, especially when they're really, really high, that time we get in the gym, if it's programmed appropriately, is a breath of fresh air, because like sometimes it's the other 23 hours in your life that's the constant struggle. And that's the
complex part. The training
that's the complex part. That's right. I can go to the gym and I know I can expect. There are times. Think about how many times you've programmed as a coach for your client, and the singular goal of the program that day was for them to have a good day in the gym. Mm-hmm. I just wanted them to walk out of the gym feeling better than they did walking in, because I knew for whatever reason, life, the other 23 hours sucked for them. Yeah. So I needed that hour to be awesome, so that they came out of the gym and they were like, I feel so much better. That's not about the days. Like, those are the days that I don't want to risk the client missing a rep on something. Totally. And they're like, I screwed up everything else in my life. I've screwed this one up too. Right? Yeah. That's what being a good coach is, and making sure that you can apply minimum effective dose changes to their program.
Awesome.
Is that it?
I think that's actually pretty great.
Did we crush it?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're going to try and make things complex, and not try and make things complex, but like, we're strength coaches. So we know all the insides and outsides of all this. And we've talked about this so much with each other and dealt with situations. Like, we understand the complexities that arise, but it's still important that you are able to feel it as simple.
That's right.
So we get to deal with the complexities in our head and understand the calculations and everything. But for you, it needs to be simple so that you can do it. And when that comes to the exercises, the ones like we talked about earlier involve the most parts of your body, and that could be through stabilization or through movement. Biggest bang for your buck, go with that one. Although they might be a little bit intimidating at first, that's where the complexity might feel pretty high. But then that's where you get to use a coach who gets to tell you also the minimum effective dose cue. What's the one cue that you need in the moment to make that movement more effective? And then we get to figure out which, like when you're looking at the sea of programs out there and the sea of machines, like probably the one that looks the most boring with the most weight is going to be the best one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the combination of simple and hard, right? So it's that, you're exactly right. That like some of those machines, you're like, sometimes they even look complex. Sometimes I get on the machines, right? You and I have trained at
which body
big box
part
gyms
goes
before.
where?
I'm like, this is crazy. But then you start to do it and you're like, well, this isn't really that hard.
Right.
Well, if it's not that hard, like how effective is it going to be? Right?
Like you have to like really try to make it hard.
That's right.
But
that's exactly right.
Like you have to do like a whole bunch of reps, or you have to do a tempo, or you have to do like sets of 15.
That's right.
3 times a week. Like it's difficult to make it hard.
But you know what's hard? Squats are hard.
Squats are hard.
And they're really not that complicated. They're really not, right? Like I get it. There's some form stuff for sure, but they're pretty simple. It's a normal biological movement pattern that we were doing when we were toddlers. It's really hard, which is why most people don't want to do it. And that's why it's so effective. And so we choose the exercises that are the simplest and the hardest and the most effective. And we make the single variable change. And this doesn't matter whether you're a beginner or an intermediate or advanced. You make the single variable change. It's going to give the greatest return on investment. That's minimum effective dose. So if I can add a little bit of weight every time, I'm going to add a little bit of weight every time. If I can't, then I'm going to have to do something else. I have to add some volume, or I'm going to have to add some tonnage, or I'm going to have to add a new exercise or whatever that, or I'm going to have to add an extra day of training.
Certain things stay consistent. Like you have to keep many things consistent and just make little adjustments on one or two things.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And when I do those things, especially when those changes remain simple, you can understand exactly why the change was made. And by the way, you should understand that whether you're getting coaching or not. Like a good coach explains those basic premises to their clients. You know, you and Andrew talked about this as well. Like it's important for me when I make a change to my client's programming, it doesn't take me but 30 seconds to tell them why I made that change. I want them to understand. I want them to learn while they're doing this. Some don't care. Some's like, just tell me what to do. But for the most part, I'm trying to help educate them along the way. And it's not that I have to have this long 45-minute like lecture. It's like, I made this change because this is what you needed for this reason. Boom. You set it up, right? It's that range of motion or whatever. And that works forever. And that's exactly what we do. So like you've been training for over 10 years at this point? I've been training for 25. We have clients that have been training for 2 weeks. And these basic principles apply whether you've been training for 2 weeks or 2 decades.
Yep.
Or 60 years. They all still apply. None of that changes. So as you get more advanced, your programming will get slightly more complex over time, but it still should be the simplest thing that works, that will work for you as an advanced lifter. And then the other thing is just to be open and honest. If someone else is doing your programming, if you have a coach, you've got to be able to be honest with them about the extra stresses that are going on the other 23 hours every day in your life. As a coach, you've got to be able to hear it, validate it, and make the appropriate changes for your clients. That's what separates you from all the other teenage personal trainers at the big box gyms. If you're a professional coach, you should be able to make the appropriate change based on the other things that are going on in your client's life. And that's it.
Totally.
That's minimum effective dose. That's how we get the best bang for our buck. That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is another episode of the Barbell Logic podcast. Thanks again so much for listening. Really, I ask this every single time. We would love 5-star reviews. I know I'm supposed to say it at the end of every episode, but here's the deal. It really, really helps. If you haven't given us a 5-star review, if you haven't reviewed the show and you get value out of the show, it changes the algorithm and helps other people find us and see us and learn about strength training and improving their quality of life. So those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify specifically are tremendous helps for us. And we read those reviews, right? So if you've got tips for us and you've got, quality critiques, not just like, I hate these people, or, Matt always wears blue, or whatever it is. Like,
whoever says Nikki laughs too much, don't worry about leaving a review.
Because because you're the humorous one. And, I'm like, I don't have any humor. I don't have a silly bone in my body.
Whatever. That's hilarious.
No, we would love, for real. It really helps us to get those 5-star reviews. So we would love a 5-star review, and then share the podcast with a friend or family member. Remember, you can get it anywhere you listen to podcasts, but you can also get it at YouTube. All you have to do is search Barbell Logic podcast. It will show up, but it's at youtube.com/c/Barbell Logic podcast. You can see us on YouTube as well. Makes it more fun to watch what we do, and then, whatever. We can watch our facial expressions, laugh at each other when I go off on a tangent, and Nikki's like, dear God, I wish he'd wrap this thing up. So, no, thanks for listening to the podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.